Hi, my name is Richard and welcome to ARCHICAD in Practice. In today's session, we will have our guest speaker Fanis Anastasiadis run through one of his projects. Fanis is a long-time user of ARCHICAD and will be showing how he makes the most of some of ARCHICAD's features. He'll also be showing you how he's incorporated Cinerender and Twinmotion into his design process to achieve the best results. So without further ado, I will hand you over to him.
Hello, my name is Fanis Anastasiadis. I'm an architect based in Islington, London. I've been working with ARCHICAD for many years, and ARCHICAD has been an integral part of my design process and has helped me evolve this design process along with the capabilities of the software itself. I will be presenting a small but challenging project we had in Islington. This is the site. I will be going into detail for various stages of the design process. This project, I did it while I was working with scenario architecture, and I will share some more information with regards to the office a bit by the end of this presentation, so you can see some other projects, ARCHICAD-based projects we did back then. And Scenario Architecture is a company that is focused on delivering high-quality homes tailored to each user with a high-resolution design. So most people, when they talk about BIM, they think more about the delivery stages of the project, tender and construction stages, where you need to put a lot of information in. I will be focusing mainly on the earlier stages, where I will try to demonstrate how ARCHICAD helps us with the design decisions and how to visualize these decisions and help us communicate better with the clients, the officers, and any other party involved in this project. So we have various visualization tools within ARCHICAD that we use in different stages. We have the main, which is the 3D model you see on the screen. We have the 3D documents, which is sort of a tool that you can have 2D and 3D information together. We have the BIMX models. We have the internal Cinerender rendering engine. And lately, after the agreement between Epic Games and ARCHICAD, we have the Twinmotion real-time render engine, where I will demonstrate in the end how it sort of surpasses other methods, and it's very helpful at the early stages to make important decisions. So as I said, these visualization methods help us with design decisions, with the client interaction, with the council interaction, and also helps us with the marketing and publications later on, because we can use these visuals to communicate to prospective clients as well. A little bit of background with regards to this project. It's in Islington. Islington is a council that is notorious for its restrictions. Most of the areas are conservation areas. They have a lot of Article 4 directions, and it feels very difficult to propose something that falls outside the normal design standards, especially in places where they are visible from the public footpath and the public highways. So our client came to us because they had this secluded rear yard where they couldn't build anything. Previously, it was a pig slaughterhouse connected to the butcher shop in the corner. And previously, attempts have been made to have a small house there, but they were unsuccessful. And mainly because in front of the house, in front of the site, there was an empty space, and the site was completely visible from the street. At some point later on, a power station was built there that changed a bit the situation. But before the power station was built, as the site was very visible from the streetscape, the officers were very uncomfortable allowing something there. So once the power station got built, we had a very unique and unusual situation there, and challenging at the same time, because we now had the possibility of building something, because it was invisible from the public footpath. However, the high walls all around the yard restricted outlook, views in general, and restricted light coming into the site. So it was a new challenge for us, and that's where the ARCHICAD's capabilities came into play, because we started designing in a 3D manner that allowed us to create a unique solution that made maximum use of the space. So our first action when we have a site like this is to create an accurate and base model where we can start our design, and we are sure that whatever we design has direct connection to the reality and the existing conditions on the site. The first thing we do, go on site, take measurements, or have a company take the measurements, of course, and we create a 3D model within ARCHICAD that we feel it's accurate, and we can base our design decisions on it. Once we have the model, we cross-reference it always with the actual site from Google Maps, for example, which now it gives you a lot of information with regards to the 3D dimensions of the site as well, not only images. Sorry for that. Not only images. So we get to see that the relation between the real site and our 3D model. This is a big advantage that we can quickly correlate these two, because the client gets easier convinced, the officer feels like we have taken all parameters into account, we are not hiding anything, and it helps them accept our design decisions, especially when they are a bit outside the normal design decisions for sites like this. Now, this site was small and it was easily accessible from our base of operations, but when we don't have this opportunity, when the site is far away and it's a big site and difficult to take all dimensions, what we normally would do is commission a laser scan 3D point cloud survey, and which would look something like this. So we have a site, the site scanned, and a point cloud file given to us where we have all the dimensions through this file, and we can quickly measure any distance and quickly view all aspects of the site. And this is translated also in internal spaces and external spaces, and it looks something like this. And in the end, if we make a comparison with the model, it will look something like this, and we're sure that it's accurate, and the officers are sure it's accurate, and we have a very good understanding of how our design actions will affect the site and different parameters as light, overlooking, outlook, etc. And you can see the relationship between the file and the finished model. Once we have this basic model in place and we are sure that we have all the accurate dimensions, we can have a more frank discussion with the officers, and we tend not to hide anything. Some people might think that we don't show everything to the officers because that would raise more questions. However, we feel like if we show everything from the start, we can address all the concerns early on, and we are sure that we will reach an agreement in the end. So we treat the officers as external consultants, as we would any other external consultant, and take all their comments on board early on, so we will have an agreeable outcome in the end. So for this specific site, instead of going the traditional way of trying to use sketches and a normal approach to a house that would lead us to a small restricted result, because if you take into account the regulations, we would have to cover half the yard, and being a 5 meter by 10 meter yard, this would amount to a 25 square meter footprint over 2 stories, something like a 51 to 55 square meter small 1-bedroom house. This was, of course, not in line with the client's needs. And of course, in a high value area as Islington, this would not be ideal, and it would not make best use of the site. So we tried to reverse engineer this, and we would think, what would be the maximum we could achieve? Could we, for example, cover everything? That would give us around 100 square meters of space. But of course, this is not possible, because we would have to allow for open space, windows, and light to penetrate all the way through. This is where the ARCHICAD's capabilities come into play. We have an inbuilt sunlight study tool within ARCHICAD that we use at every step of the way to make sure that all areas receive adequate light during specific times of the day and of the year. For example, we know that we have to take into account for days in a year, the 21st of September, December, March, and June, to make sure that we have enough light to comply with the DRE standards for interior daylight sunlight. So what we did is start with a volumetric approach, create 2 volumes that came to be from these sun studies, where we understood where the light comes from and how these rough volumes need to be saved. And we created a sort of a diagram for this approach, which you can see here. All these visualizations come from within ARCHICAD. We created what is called the milk render. It's a parameter within the rendering settings of Cinerender, and you can see it here. It's the use white model effect. So we created these nice visuals to communicate our designed actions. So we have the existing site annotated here. We propose to demolish the whole thing, because now the site would be behind raised walls, to allow for 2 stories and to keep it invisible from the public footpath. We had to lower the floor while keeping some distance around in the perimeter of the site, in order not to mess too much with the foundations of the power station mainly. So what happened then was, as I said, we reverse engineered it. We created a volume that covers the whole site, and then saw where we need to allow space for amenity and for light purposes. This created this sort of a volume. And then the second story above that, we removed more of the initial volume, because we had to allow for more light to come and penetrate all the way through to the lower ground floor level. And this created this shape, which in the end came to be our result. For the final stage, we optimized the skylights, and we added some glazed corridors. I will show you further down this presentation, that allow the light to penetrate at various spots all the way to the lower ground floor main areas. So 3D design was essential for this approach, because we couldn't sketch it in 2D and try to figure out where the light comes. We don't design in 2D anymore, not even for sketches. What we do is design straight into the 3D mode, into the 3D space, and make sure that we test each time all the parameters that we can, like some sunlight, within the software. So that we don't have the need to go to external consultants at the early stages and add costs to the whole process for the client as well, and time, because the internal capabilities of ARCHICAD gives us the opportunity at every stage, as I said, to test this how the sun falls within the premises. And this is a test that we did, for example, for this room, and we could see that from a certain point in time onwards during a day, we have direct sunlight within the main areas of the house, and this goes on for about 4 to 5 hours every day, which in turn gives us the confidence that our design actions were correct. And we use this very often. It's not like we're doing one video at a time, and it takes a bit of time to produce in high quality, but it's always worth it. And as we will see with Twinmotion later on, these light studies are much easier and quicker to produce, and they're much more helpful from the beginning till the end of the project. Now, designing in 3D also gave us a bit of a different approach to plans and how we present them to the clients. Normally, we would give normal plans, 2D plans to the client, like, for example, let me show you quickly from this project. It would show some of the objects that we have used, general dimensions, and the quick layout of the building. However, we feel like it's not communicating our intentions in the best way to the clients and to the officers sometimes as well. Because from what we found out about this project was the officers in the first stages could not understand very well the space and the high quality of accommodation we could provide. And that's why they raised a lot of concerns, which were very quickly addressed once we had a very quick meeting with them and showed them the 3D model. So what we do is combine the 3D cutouts of the main model For example, we can use ARCHICAD's capabilities to create very quickly cutting planes that will bring a new level of information available. And it sort of connects the 2D information with the 3D information. So we found out that this way of communicating visually the plans with the client is much more efficient, and it helps them make some bold decisions, especially in the early stages. And it saves us a lot of time and a lot of back and forth communication with them. So in the same feeling that our diagrams would produce, we created some plans and overlaid some 2D information, and you can very quickly connect to what is happening. You can get a very quick feeling of the space, again with the same milk rendering tool within the Cinerender engine. We believe it's a much more efficient way to communicate. And we have the whole series, of course, for the client to see. You can see the 2 bedrooms on top and the roof plan. And also with this type of presentation, you can really see a bit more information about how light penetrates, because you can see the transparency within the plan and the floor, and you can see where the light comes from and where it ends up in the lower ground floor. So as I said before, there were some issues with the officers in the beginning because they couldn't understand the complexity of our proposal. So when we started this project, we hadn't finalized the way we approach the design and how we communicate this the officers. The council was at the time only accepting plans, not 3D models, of course, and some still images perhaps. And we thought that we should do as in any normal project, which would be basically to send them a series of the plans and to try to introduce some images to show how the space would look. So our initial model would look something like this. Again, the same concept, the same volume, but it would look something like this. The entrance, going in, a very empty space, just to show that the space fulfill the housing criteria and standards, the distances, the general dimensions. Very, very simple model, which, by the way, they didn't see because we didn't provide them with a BMX model. They wouldn't accept BMX models. So we produced a series of plans, a series of sections, elevations, and some very basic images, which in hindsight were very, very simple, and we shouldn't have done so. We should have given them a bit more. So the interior would look something like this in the early renders. Didn't make much sense. They couldn't understand how this space could be higher quality. It could be dark. They could feel miserable. So when they raised all these concerns, sort of an alarm bell rang in our heads, and we said, okay, we need to step up our game. We need to give them a bit more information, because really this does not convey our design intentions. So we addressed some of their concerns through minor design changes, as you will see in our next submission. So one of their main concerns was views and outlook. So we tried to open up the space as much as possible. We got rid of some partitions, as you can see here. We opened up a bit the space, introduced some more openings to allow maximum line of sight, because we have a very specific dimension above which we cannot go for outlook. It's the diagonal size of the yard, as you can see here. It's this dimension. And once we went with a new model, the updated model, to the officers, and we showed them in a meeting there, they quickly understood that it wasn't the case of what they thought it would be. It was a bright environment. It was much more open. They could see the connection with the sky, how the light penetrates all the way to the lower ground floor. So a basic tool that we used was the model. We went with a laptop there, with the ARCHICAD model, and discussed with them, navigating through the model and actually doing some design actions on the spot, like moving walls. This helped them realize that we are flexible, first of all. It's not like we are giving a final solution and that's it, we don't want to change. And it also helped them become part of the process, made them feel a bit of ownership of the design process, and made them want to help us reach a solution, which for me, this collaborative approach is the best way to approach especially restricted sites like this. So another concern they had, as I said, was light. Again, we showed them that there is adequate light coming in from all around the openings, perimetrically around the site, and that the skylights and the glazed corridors were strategically located to allow as much light as possible to the lower ground floor level. But the point that really sold our proposal was the new 3D visuals from the Cinerender engine. We spent some more time, optimized materials. Let me find a bit the images that I want to show you. So we produced some more detailed renders. We allowed a bit more time for the render to bake, let's say. Some more light calculations, longer render times, of course. It takes a bit more time and resources to do this. But once you set up the model in a way that these renders can happen easily, it cuts the time significantly, and you can use it in your templates in other files as well. So once they saw these 3D images, suddenly they said, oh, now we understand much better what's happening. So we didn't have to go outside our software. We used the internal Cinerender engine, and it was sort of a revelation that we should be doing it for every project, small or large, because it really helps us convey our design intent to the officers and to the clients. So going a bit more into this rendering capabilities of ARCHICAD, as I said, in the first round planning, we did something very, very basic. We thought it was okay because it was just planning. Then we set up our game producing these visuals. And now it's a part of every project that we do really, really good detailed renders. And Twinmotion now comes into play because it might give you a bit lower resolution results than what Cinerender can give you. However, it's immediate results, and very quick changes can happen without having to re-render a whole scene for many, many hours. And this helps also with the clients take very, very quick decisions, because when they see the render, they understand the materials, and they understand very quickly if they like them or not. And we have used this to, with a lot of different projects, as I said, and some various examples I can show you from other projects. So we have used interior renders to choose materials, to choose lighting, to choose products even. If a client has a very specific product in mind, we put it in these renders, and they understand our comments about the product being in line with all the other ones, or the palette is working, or different textures are needed. So they get what we're saying, and when something goes wrong, they understand the need to omit things. Exterior renders for developers, for example, again, we showcase how the space is going to be used, some vegetation, some different views for the clients and the potential buyers, some internal, again, views of bedrooms and how the light is going to penetrate penetrate to the room, and how the atmosphere is going to be affected, again with products and materials like carpets and pendants. Some interior design solutions, used the garden, and we're using also only the internal ARCHICAD capabilities. And the foliage, for example, you can see in the background is all through the ARCHICAD models. And there are various tips and tricks to make them look good, because normal ARCHICAD models do not look that good in the default mode, but you can tweak them, and there are ways. I can show you very quickly a quick way to do it. For example, we select these trees that are the basic ARCHICAD trees. And a very quick change to the settings can provide you with much better results. For example, the density, you can very quickly put it 100. The resolution of the leaves from 3, which mean that they are triangles, you can put it to 12. They become very, very round, and make them a bit smaller. And perhaps add a different material that will make them feel a bit more solid. And you can very quickly have a much nicer result. But when it's on the background, and perhaps with some depth of field, it will look something like this, or even something like this. These are the same trees with different parameters, and all these renders come from the internal Cinerender engine. As I said, there's a big difference between the internal Cinerender engine and the Twinmotion, and you can get a bit more effects and details in the Cinerender engine, but it costs a lot of resources, computer resources and time, whereas Twinmotion is very quick, and you can change very quickly things with the same quality without having to compromise on quality. And I will open a bit and demonstrate a bit later on the Twinmotion model. Now, I'll go back a bit to the planning and authorities interaction with the officers, be it with planning officers, conservation officers, or building control officers. ARCHICAD and the visualization modes that we have within it can help us communicate much better to all of them, and in a bit more technical way sometimes. So we can again use the 3D model, the VMX model, but also we can use some 3D renders, some cutouts, which make it much easier for people to understand what's happening, especially for building control. However, as you can see, 3D cutouts, we will lose sometimes a lot of information. So when we render it through the Cinerender engine, it can give us a bit more information, and we can sort of control what type of internal schemes and wall build-ups we show, especially for building control purposes. And it would look something like this. We have used it in many projects. For this project, we haven't done it because it only went up to planning. But for other projects we have used this 3D visualization cutouts. For example, this is a conservation area project. We used this type of 3D rendered cutouts to show how the levels, which we changed a bit, would look like in a grade 2 listed building, and they would understand the immediate connection because we spent a bit more time to detail the facades and make them as accurate as possible. For example, in this project, the house in Chelsea, this image helped communicate to all parties involved a connection of the rear garden area basement to the rest of the house, and the new staircase, because the whole staircase was new, especially in the conservation area in Chelsea. And it helped also the clients understand the complexity and the size of the project. And in another case, we had a conversation with the building control officers because we had a CLT building combined with a concrete structure. So it was much easier for us to communicate things through rendered 3D models and where the services would go, how the piling would be, and make the whole process much faster and much easier. Now, once we had the officers on board for this project, and we explained in detail the complexity of the project, and they were happy to go with it, we got permission granted. The client at this stage didn't continue with us to construction, so we had to think of how we would present this project ourselves in the way we intended it to happen, and in order not to lose anything from our initial design intentions. So we decided to allow a bit more time to create better visuals, to submit it for the New London Architecture, the NLA Awards, and to create a bit of marketing material for our office as well at the time. So what we did at that time is to try to think of ways to put high quality materials and models inside our main model. So we used the plugin, it's called Model Port. It can bring very, very detailed objects from other software as well. So we could use any 3D model available in the market, like 3D Max models, FBX models, OBJ models from various sources. And Model Port has the ability to create new parameters for each project that you can use within ARCHICAD. For example, this sofa. It's a real product that was built in another software. However, with Model Port, it created a lot of parameters that you could rotate. You could hide some wire meshes if you don't want to use, for example, the pillows or the blanket. And you can use different materials optimized. Also, we brought some high quality textures. And the result, after many hours of optimizations and carefully choosing objects, is what you see here. It's a highly detailed interior model that it sort of creates a very, very heavy file, around 1 gigabyte at this point, which is a big file for an ARCHICAD model. However, it's only for visualization purposes at this stage, and it makes it a bit difficult to translate to VMX to give to the clients. So this is where Twinmotion would come into play, which is very easy to translate these things. And because you don't have to use external models, you can use the internal Twinmotion models. It's much easier to use. However, at the time, as we said, Twinmotion was not an option, so we had to rely on the internal ARCHICAD capabilities. As you can see, it's a pretty detailed model. We have the kitchen here. We brought some objects. Have a small compliant shower room here. Plant brought from external software, books, models of books that came from various sources, 3D Max, SketchUp, other models, chairs, tables. I'm showing all this because you will see the direct comparison with Twinmotion later on and see how much easier and faster it is with Twinmotion, because we spent a lot of time loading and reloading objects, optimizing textures here to create the result that you will see in a couple of minutes. Going up, the staircase, external space there, Going in the bedrooms, we have a bathroom at the end. One bedroom. Second bedroom with access to the external space. Skylights all around. So we spent quite a lot of time, as I said, and this translated to a very nice series of images, which I will show you right now. So this is the interior of a small bedroom. You can see how the light penetrates, how this creates a bright environment. This is a real simulation of the sun at a specific time of the year, a specific time of the day. What I always do with the renders is try to introduce some elements, as I said, that connect to reality. So we need some reflections, we need some metallic objects, we need some real life like textures, like the fabric here, some fluid materials, some fluid objects like the blankets. Introducing depth of field, where it sort of makes it look like a camera. Some real images also helps the mind connect a bit better to the to reality. Some lights. Again, you can see that it is indeed a bright environment, even though it is submerged by 800 millimeters, and there are no windows, there are no views towards an open space. It's all enclosed within a 5-meter by 10-meter yard. This is the main space. You can see how all these objects translate and how the high quality objects make this image come together. But the grabbing point is the light and how light diffuses into space. And adding reflective materials as well helps these interior images, because it adds an extra depth to the whole image. We played a bit with the night views as well, to show that even when there is no sun, there is diffuse light coming from everywhere. And this helps the whole project, these visuals helps the whole project a bit solidify in our minds as well, because now we are sure that what we did can be translated into a real live and bright place, high quality accommodation, and not just a design that could have been. This is an external render. Again, it shows where the light penetrates all the way down to the lower ground floor levels. It gives you an overall sense of the model and the entrance, what you would see approaching the house from the outside. So these renders helped us also secure the shortlist, place in the shortlist of the NLA Awards, alongside some other famous architects and projects in the unbuilt, of course, category, because we have access to the built side. Now, I showed you the results of the ARCHICAD Cinerender engine. So now I'm going to show you a bit how this would translate into Twinmotion, the latest edition of Twinmotion 2020 that comes with the ARCHICAD 23 license. And if we had access to this software at that time, perhaps I wouldn't have spent so much time trying to optimize the 3D renders and add models and add textures and wait for whole nights for the image to finalize. So what this will translate in a Twinmotion model, it's basically this. You can see very quickly that there are similarities and there are differences. One difference could be the light calculation is a bit rougher here because it's a real-time engine and calculates as we go, whereas the Cinerender engine, it has calculated light for about 6 to 8 hours. It has created a very nice and diffused way of presenting the light within the image. So direct comparison would be, just a moment to open the file. This is the Twinmotion one. And this is the Cinerender one. Again, this is the very quick presentation from Twinmotion, not optimized at all. Whereas this is ultra optimized and with a lot of time spent on actually choosing the products and the various objects and textures. So going within Twinmotion now, I will show you a bit how we can very quickly change the model and very quickly take some decisions for the clients without having to redo renders over and over again. So for example, let's say the client didn't like the texture of the floor. We wouldn't have to wait another 8 hours to create a new texture for the floor. We will go very quickly to the materials within Twinmotion, go down to wood, sorry, concrete, and very quickly apply sort of a different material. So all the changes are immediate. And we can change reflection very quickly, change the bump, or use different type of concrete very quickly. So what would have been an exchange of 3 different images over 4 days could be half an hour conversation with the client, going through the model quickly together, changing things. The same with objects. We wouldn't have to spend so much time choosing these objects, trying to import them into the ARCHICAD model and making the ARCHICAD model much bigger than it should have been. But we could very quickly go through the Twinmotion object library, go to living room, go to chairs or sofas, choose another sofa, bring it in, put it into place. You see it's affected by sun very quickly. You don't have to wait for it to render. It's a real-time thing. You could very quickly add some plants. Plants, you know that in ARCHICAD, because of the high number of polygons they have, they're very heavy and they can obstruct other actions you need to do in ARCHICAD, like doing elevations, doing sections, because ARCHICAD tries to recalculate the triangles again. So we could very quickly bring different objects. And the quality of these objects is very, very good as well. So you can see that the objects come optimized with textures, with materials. You can even manipulate the objects separately or change things. So in general, compromising very little on quality, on end quality, because of course a render that you can spend 25 hours on or put it in a render farm can provide very, very good and high quality light calculations. Whereas in Twinmotion, you have a standard quality all the time, the same quality. You know that all your renders will look the same, which is very, very useful when you want to have consistency over all the projects and the presentation of your projects, for example, on your website. So I would highly recommend using Twinmotion every stage, especially the early stages, to make some very, very quick and decisions in the beginning, so you don't lose time in going over and over textures and objects. And in the end, you can do also videos, and it will help also in the design process with the light study. As I said, you don't have to wait for the light studies to be completed from within ARCHICAD. Twinmotion can be very fast, even live. As you can see with the location and the times, we can very, very quickly change the time, the month, see how it affects the internal lighting conditions, and very, very quickly know if your design decisions are correct. You can even change the orientation, which of course doesn't make too much sense because it's set from the beginning, but you can see a bit the capabilities of Twinmotion in providing very quick information about site, about light, about even weather conditions, how it would look, for example, in a not so bright day. If it's a cloudy day, if it's a winter day, if there is wind, how much wind, if you have external vegetation, of course, it will be affected. And there are lots of sort of things that you can use to your benefit in your discussions also with the clients. So for more projects like this, you can go to the Scenario Architecture website, which was the office I was working at the time. And you could get more of these projects ARCHICAD based and Twinmotion based as well. And you can see the consistency of the visuals that create a very nice continuity in the project space, because you can see we had a lot of projects completed and some projects underway, and you can see the Twinmotion, the real images, Twinmotion, Twinmotion, real, Twinmotion. There is a sort of consistent feeling in all these things. And you can also see a very simple representation of the project I showed you, and some early Twinmotion images that we did at the time. That's all for me. Thank you for watching, and thank you for your interest in my work. And I would like to thank AppleCore as well for inviting me to present my work and the process through this webinar.
So that concludes this ARCHICAD in practice presentation. Firstly, I just want to say a massive thank you to Fanis for giving us the benefit of this experience, I suppose, and sharing this project with us. I certainly thought it was a fascinating insight into your workflow, and hopefully everyone at home thought so as well. If you have any questions or would like to know anything more about ARCHICAD, or if you have any general feedback, please enter them into the question box on the GoToWebinar panel. We'll get back to you either by phone or by email. Once again, I just want to say thank you for taking the time out to attend this presentation, and hope that you all stay safe during this current pandemic.